Hello, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a major turning point in the ongoing Ukraine conflict, as Belarus, a longtime ally of Vladimir Putin, has officially entered the war. This development has sent shockwaves across Europe and around the world, raising questions about how this move will change the balance of power, escalate tensions, and potentially open up a new front in the conflict. For months, analysts warned that Belarus could be the wild card, and now that moment has arrived. In this video, we will look at why Belarus made this decision, how it impacts Ukraine, what Russia stands to gain, and why NATO is now on high alert. This is not just another headline. This could be the moment that shifts the entire direction of the war. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has always walked a fine line between supporting Russia and avoiding direct confrontation. But that line has officially been crossed. Belarusian forces have begun cooperating with Russian military operations, providing strategic positions, logistical support, and, most importantly, allowing the deployment of troops and weapons directly from Belarusian territory. This effectively turns Belarus into a launchpad for attacks on Ukraine. Ukraine now faces the possibility of a northern front opening once again, just like in the early days of the war when Russian forces tried to capture Kyiv. The difference this time is that Belarus is not just allowing access, it is actively joining the fight. One of the biggest reasons behind this decision is pressure from Moscow. Vladimir Putin has been pushing his allies to show loyalty, especially as Russia faces growing losses, global sanctions, and increasing support for Ukraine from the West. Belarus has become heavily dependent on Russia economically and militarily, and Lukashenko knows that refusing Putin could threaten his own power. In exchange for joining the conflict, Belarus expects stronger political backing, financial support, and possibly even nuclear protection. In fact, Russia already stationed tactical nuclear weapons inside Belarus, a move that alarmed NATO months ago. Now, with Belarus entering the conflict, those weapons take on a far more dangerous meaning. Ukraine, meanwhile, is in a difficult position. It has been focused on defending the east and south, where the heaviest fighting has taken place. Opening a new front in the north would force Ukraine to split its forces, stretch its resources, and defend multiple directions at once. Ukrainian officials have already confirmed increased activity near the Belarusian border, with new trenches being dug, surveillance operations expanded, and air defenses being repositioned. Kyiv's leaders have warned that if Belarus fully commits troops, it will be treated as an enemy combatant, not just a supporting nation. This means Belarus could become a direct target of Ukrainian strikes. But why would Belarus take such a massive risk? One key reason is Lukashenko's fear of losing power. Belarus has faced internal unrest and protests for years, and Lukashenko relies on Russia to stay in control. By joining the war, he is proving loyalty to Putin and securing his regime. However, this move could backfire. Many Belarusians do not want to fight in this war, and reports suggest that some Belarusian officers quietly oppose the decision. If Belarusian soldiers start returning in body bags, public anger could explode. There are already Belarusian volunteer groups fighting on the side of Ukraine, which means Belarusians may end up fighting each other on opposite sides. This could lead to internal instability and even civil unrest inside Belarus. For Russia, Belarus entering the conflict offers major advantages. First, it gives Russia access to new strategic positions close to Kyiv, making a renewed assault on the capital more realistic. Second, it allows Russian forces to rotate and rest while Belarusian units take over certain responsibilities. Third, it sends a message to the world that Russia is not isolated that it still has loyal allies willing to join the fight. However, this also demonstrates Russia's growing desperation. If the war was going well for Moscow, it wouldn't need help. By pulling Belarus into the conflict, Russia is showing that it cannot win alone. NATO's response has been swift. Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia, countries that border Belarus, have increased troop deployments and extended surveillance operations. The NATO alliance now considers the Belarus border one of the most dangerous flashpoints in Europe. Any accidental or intentional strike on NATO territory could trigger Article 5, meaning an attack on one member is an attack on all. This is the nightmare scenario, a regional war turning into a full-scale global conflict. Western leaders have warned Belarus that joining Russia's aggression will have severe consequences, including more sanctions and possible military containment. The EU is preparing economic blocs, and several countries are discussing cutting Belarus from international banking systems. Ukraine has also issued a strong warning. President Zelensky stated that if Belarus supports Russian attacks, Ukraine will have the right to respond with force. This means Belarusian military bases, supply routes, and command centers could become targets. The Ukrainian military has already proven its ability to strike deep behind enemy lines using drones and special operations. If Belarus becomes a battleground, this war could escalate faster than anyone expects. Belarusian infrastructure, railways, and airports could be hit, disrupting the entire region. Another major concern is the possibility of nuclear involvement. With Russian nuclear weapons stored in Belarus, the stakes are higher than ever. Even if those weapons are not used, their presence increases pressure on NATO and complicates any potential response. Analysts warn that Putin could threaten to move more nuclear assets into Belarus as a way to intimidate the West. This would push the world closer to a nuclear standoff. On a strategic level, this conflict is no longer just about Ukraine and Russia. It is becoming a proxy battlefield involving global powers. The United States continues to supply Ukraine with billions in military aid, while European nations send tanks, artillery, and advanced air defense systems. On the other side, Russia is supported by Iran, China, North Korea, and now officially Belarus. Each month, the battlefield becomes more complex, more dangerous, and more international. One key question remains: will Belarus actually deploy troops into Ukraine, or will it limit its involvement to support roles? Some officials suggest Belarus may begin by sending special forces or artillery units rather than full-scale infantry. Others believe Belarus might force Ukrainian troops to divert attention by creating the threat of invasion without actually attacking. Either way, the psychological impact is massive. Ukraine must now defend a much larger border. Every kilometer of land requires soldiers, equipment, and surveillance. This stretches Ukraine thin and gives Russia an advantage. However, this move could also backfire on Russia and Belarus. Ukraine has become highly experienced in defending its land and adapting to new threats. If Belarus enters the war and fails to achieve results, it could weaken both allies. Ukraine could use this opportunity to target Belarusian supply lines, disrupt communication networks, and force Russia to divide its forces. Belarus does not have the same combat experience as Russian troops, and morale could drop quickly. If their army struggles, it could embarrass Lukashenko and damage his credibility. The international reaction will also shape what happens next. Countries like Poland and the Baltic states may consider sending even more military aid to Ukraine. There are discussions about stationing permanent NATO forces near the Belarus border to deter escalation. If Belarus becomes fully engaged in the conflict, Western nations may no longer see it as a neutral state, but as an active enemy. This could lead to long-term isolation for Belarus, even after the war ends. In the end, Belarus officially entering the Ukraine conflict marks the beginning of a new and unpredictable chapter. The stakes are higher, the risks are greater, and the possibility of a larger war is more real than ever. This decision could either help Russia regain momentum or accelerate its downfall. It could strengthen Lukashenko's regime or push it to collapse. And it could force Ukraine to fight on multiple fronts or inspire even stronger support from the international community. What happens next will depend on how far Belarus is willing to go. Will they send troops across the border? Will Ukraine strike back? Will NATO get directly involved? The world is watching closely, and every move from this point forward could reshape the future of Europe. One thing is certain: the conflict is entering its most dangerous phase yet, and the decisions made in the coming weeks could determine the outcome of the entire war. Thank you for watching. Stay informed and stay tuned for more updates as this historic situation continues to unfold.